The decision was made to remove these specifics, however. Everything in my nation is specifics. Every detail has anim stones, trees, fruits, seasons, and individuals on July 23, 2024. And 84, an elderly woman emerged from a silver hair laundromat in East London red scarf, pale shirt, and naked face. No flashing cameras, no stage, no bodyguards. However, within hours that candid picture spreads like Jolie Christie was that woman. Wildfire. The 1960s icon who once shook Hollywood with only an elevated brow and a pair of dejected her. Unique eyes once made Warren, after being rejected, Batty wanted to marry her. The Bond girl character was once awarded, and after that, Oscar vanished. She didn't retire, didn't say goodbye to her in a quiet way, disappeared as though the attention had never been intelligent enough to accommodate her. So what created a star that was once revered worldwide? Decide to live in quiet and discover what lies behind the glitz and behind the style, behind those timeless characters, the spirit of a lady artist who never lived with someone else's. Anticipations for Jolie Christie's path is more than just a tale of film triumph. Holding on is a lesson in freedom to oneself, even if it involves walking Jolie away from all the glamour and shine. On April 14th, Francis Christie was born. A tea ceremony at the Shingong Tea Estate in 1940 planting in northeastern Chabwa, Assam Frank St. John Christie was her father in India, was a plantation manager from Britain, and her mother, Welsh painter Rosemary Ramsden, from the day of her birth. Jolie lived between two extremes, the rigorous discipline of the colonial British regime on the one hand, and the free-spirited on the other. Her mother's creative personality on the John was the half-sister of another Jolie. Christie was born into her. Dad's connection to a plantation in India, worker-to-worker relationship taken into account, disgraceful in light of colonial society. This tale was kept secret for years, but that was the first indication that Jolie's existence would be entangled with implicit contradictions, but she hardly ever brought it up afterwards. Being raised in a household characterized by stillness, she was definitely shaped by her fractures. Viewpoint. On truth and identity power, Jolie was transferred to England when she was 6 years old, tour search. She grew up in foster care, apart from her parents, and attending the surroundings of a Catholic convent school, was stern, frigid, and inflexible, in contrast to her vibrant early years in India. She used to be in India, expelled for making offensive remark, stales a glaring early indication that Jolie wasn't one to follow rules, would eventually acknowledge that this time frame ended her with a profound feeling of desertion. It has a significant impact on her lifelong unwillingness to commit, and her hesitation to be married, and her choice to not have children following her stay in England. Christie was sent to continue in Paris her studies and improve her French. She had been proficient in the language since childhood there. Jolie was 9 years old, had a life-changing event that she kept hidden, broke out of her boarding school and wandered for the whole day with a stranger, a young performer who was having trouble establish a reputation for himself. His talent enthralled her, as Jolie would subsequently state. That's when she realized she wanted to pursue acting, not for the sake of fame, but for liberty. The liberty to exist, many life experiences to escape she had known a strictly regulated reality. Since she was a kid when Jolie returned to England, she enrolled after deciding to pursue the stage in the Speech Central School and London's. Drama is among the most notable performing arts institutions of the nation. Jolie stood out there. But not because she performed better intellectually than others, although due to the way she articulated herself, unforced by nature, she didn't behave. She pretended to be in order to win over her teachers. Following graduation from Central London's School of Speech and Drama, Jolie Christie did not instantly turn into a well-known figure on the large screen. She started out quietly and cautiously in her career, but always made a statement with her unique approach. Although a lot of actors from that time still followed the conventional theatrical style that is overdone and has clear diction, Jolie chose to use more organic gestures. Her contemporary manner of acting makes her, it seems as though the characters have stepped really life. Christie got her first job in 1961, the role of television in BBC Science. The television show A for Andromeda was. She performed an odd character that a woman devised by a computer that is cold, seductive, and not completely human. Julie's. Subtle minimal dialogue and performance expressions attracted both of their attention. Directors and viewers found her to be rapidly viewed as being similar to Brigitte Bardot, although a more intelligent and mysterious version of the BBC was even suggested that she sign a long-term agreement, but they turned down a decision that was later considered a significant error when the sequel to the show was produced. Christie was recast in the part. As she had already departed to look for of her own course in 1962, she started showing up in feature films with 2 supporting parts in comedies from Britain. The Fast Lady and Crooks Anonymous, both movies, were a fun kind of entertainment, and failed to create any publicity for Christie, but they allowed her to become acquainted with the camera and discover the filmmaking technicalities. It was a moment when she silently watched students study how movies were produced from within, ready to provide the background music as, getting ready for a bigger leap, in 1963, she had the chance when she was chosen to play Liz in Billy Liar, a free-spirited, seductive, and rebellious a young lady who declined to be limited by a sleepy little town or men who are cautious and fearful of living truthfully. Liz is seen strolling down the street in a head lifted high in a miniskirt while passing. Everyone looks without, turning around, immediately come to represent the British women's awakening in the 1960s. Few individuals are aware that the function of Liz was intended to be an actress. Topsy. Jane had to step down because Julie was called in due to health concerns at the final moment. With limited time, Christie arrived on set to get ready, and director John astounded the entire crew. Schlesinger is renowned for being thorough, acknowledged that Julie doesn't pretend. She lives as if she is actually Liz. The movie was an unexpected hit, and reviewers praised it as Jolie Christie's birth as a new celebrity, unusually peaceful and scandal-free, made it impossible to turn away even now. 1965 was the year when she first debuted on screen. Nobody was able to ignore the name that year. In that one year, Jolie Christie portrayed 2 characters that couldn't be more different, each making a significant contribution to film. Diana Scott is a history buff who is impulsive, and Paradigm of Conflict in Darling, and Lara Antipova is a kind but intensely affectionate doctor. Zhivago's wife in Darling, Julia, represented the swinging 1960s emblem, a new wave of contemporary city women who were defiant and uncompromising. The movie explored the void that lies behind the shiny exterior of the affluent class, and Christie's icy, penetrating eyes, and Diana felt that the purposefully flat tone, the Oscar for Best Actress, is unsettlingly real, come to her with conviction, but what individuals recalled with equal clarity as the attire she wore to receive the honor glistening gold pantsuit that was created and she became the first to sew by herself. The woman who wore trousers on stage at the Oscars are breaking the strict fashion Hollywood conventions with a single act and without expressing regret in the same year. Christie played the lead in Doctor, one of the most popular epics is Zhivago in history, as Lara Julie played a Russian lady who was delicate and tenacious in the midst of conflict and separation. Her chemistry on film was so strong with Omar Sharif that a few sequences were cut because they were too, by 1960 standards. The film was daring. Received 5 Academy Awards and rose to worldwide. Christie phenomenon in just a few months had changed from an increasing celebrity into a global FaceTime, in addition to calling it the year of Jolie Christie, but added, "What? Jolie Christie's attire has greater sway on style compared to all of the clothing of Thetan, of the most stylish women in total. They weren't, from her head coverings, she exaggerated turtlenecks, to her easily defeated. Jolie defied fashion by creating a sort of fashion that disapproved of fashion young ladies in America and Europe. When they got to her, they hurried to copy her, apex rather than riding the crest of blockbuster deals. She selected parts that were difficult and unpredictable. Fahrenheit 451, François Truffaut directed a dismal film in 1966. She acted in a science fiction movie. Clarice and Linda, the 2 main characters, then The Madding Crowd is Far Away. 67, in which she played an autonomous. 3 men are chasing a woman. Marking another pivotal moment from film star to actress in the early 1970s who was serious, Christie kept getting better with Don't Look Now, a daring psychological horror movie from 1973 that included a realistic sex scene. Rumor had it that it was real, and then misses. Miller and McCabe in 1971, where she played a clever and crafty brothel proprietor, a position that brought her a second nomination for an Oscar following a period of leaving the mainstream movie theaters. Christie came back in 1997 with Afterglow, an American indie film in which she played a disgruntled middle-aged woman. The performance earned her a spot in Her Marriage. She received her third Oscar nomination in 10 years, away from her 2007. Was later one of her most well-known roles, as an Alzheimer's patient woman facing the progressive deterioration of memory and her powerlessness of the husband. The role brought a fourth Oscar nomination for her in addition to a SAG Award, a Golden Globe, and several scenes from Away From Her receives honors from critics, even utilized in medical education. Help educate patients with Alzheimer's conduct. A unique example of the power of genuine performance, Jolie Charlie might have served as a representation of beauty and knowledge for a generation, but her understanding her private life was never idyllic, spoke Italian and French and lived in freedom, never concealed her and loved her dearly uniqueness. However, beneath that glowing exterior lay a complicated spirit that is constantly afraid of fame, fearful of being dominated. Prior to the Jolie Charlie was well known as, and the Oscar-winning actress was merely an up and aspiring actor learning how to endure in the hectic world of cinema. At the time it was she first met Terence Stamp in the early 1960s. The youthful performer was praised as the most dangerously promising British face of cinema. They first met at a theatre in London. Party Stamp was already creating a stir with Billy Budd and attracting notice. Christie was still a faint voice from Hollywood, but one aspect of her remained constant, an aura of strong independence combined with a man who is a fragile and intriguing mystery. Attracted to women he found difficult to understand, was immediately enthralled with Christie's quiet enigma. They conversed for hours regarding European cinema and literature, politics, and the ridiculousness of celebrity. Wasn't a passionate love story, but a profound resonance that is nearly same but not quite, maintaining a specific distance at all times. Stamp stated during an interview that Jolie doesn't require someone to help her stand out, enters a room without saying anything, and all the others figure out how to be quiet. Both were about to become famous, and that became, in a sense, the main thing. Whatever caused them to split apart, Stamp started staying longer in the United States while Jolie was starting to make a splash in the UK. When Liz's part in Billy Liar arrived to the point that brought her, Stamp was the first to enter the spotlight, to accompany her in reading the script, and urged her to just follow your intuition, time, space, and ultimately, different life objectives led to their relationship to wane. There was no formal split away without arguing or betraying each other, just two individuals traveling in separate directions, and neither of them went back. Was noteworthy how, years later, they continued to discuss each other with much regard. Stamp once remarked, Jolie is unlike anyone I've ever met. I was perplexed by her actions, and nobody has ever forced me to remain silent, while Jolie, for her part, rarely engages in a dialogue. Talked about Terence a lot in public, yet, when questioned about their relationship, she merely said, he understood me more than I understood. Prior to Jolie Charlie being renowned worldwide for Dr. Zhivago or Darling, she shared a home with Don Bassant, a painter who is not well known or included in the entertainment sector, but someone who was essential in the early years of her profession. Jolie and Don first connected about 1962 when she was barely starting to land. Jolie had small television parts at the time, wasn't a celebrity yet. And Don was a reserved young artist. They moved in right away, living together as though they were married in a little apartment in London. Don disliked being in the spotlight, and at the time, Jolie didn't require it. In 1965, two became engaged, but never. Christie, who is married, previously explained this marriage as the most secure life. Don was polite, soft-spoken, and always let her to be herself. Without makeup, roles to play after Jolie's Oscar victory, it was Don who went with her in 1966. Returning to London, the two were captured on camera at the airport, but the media was unaware of it. who he was, which was perfect for Julie. She disliked having her private life made public. But as Julie's career took off, things started to change, and she had to go, continuously for filming in different nations, but Dawn continued to yearn for a peaceful, stable existence. They slowly drifted separated, not because of a dispute, but rather because they desired to live a variety of. They split up in 1966 and lived together until 1967, at Born Free's royal premiere in by then. London Warren Beatty was already one among the most well-known actors in Hollywood. For the first time, Jolie Christie was waiting in queue to welcome the Queen, Elizabeth II's modest yet eye-catching attire Beatty, who was not smiling or posing, going to the event with his then Leslie Caron, an actress's girlfriend, turned around in order to get another look at Julie for a man who had encountered almost all Hollywood's screen siren who is unmarried. Just a quick look revealed that she was different. Beatty asked his pal if anyone else, Richard Silbert, a production designer who, having collaborated on Petulia with Christie, to Julie consented to a phone call to connect them. Call Beatty right away and take a plane to San Francisco, the location where she was shooting there. The initial encounter was far from romantic, direct, chilly, and a little tense, but both were some who didn't first believe in perceptions. They favored intricacy after both had ended. A few months later, their prior partnerships, they formally joined as a pair at their 1967 to 1967. 7 years together, Warren and Julie never lived under the 1974, the identical roof, yet they remained consistent. Beings in one another's lives kept. Their personal areas separate, but seemed toe together for significant movie debuts, red carpets, and even expert choices. Julie appeared in 3 movies. With Mrs. Miller Shampoo and Batty McCabe and Heaven Can Wait, but above everything else, they both believed that art might alter the world, but celebrity couldn't. "I've never met someone," Batty once remarked. "Julie doesn't have to express that she likes her. When people hear anything, they go silent." Her thoughts. However, the partnership Julie took love seriously, therefore it wasn't easy. She was a believer in faithfulness, but not in getting married or starting a family. Batty on the alternatively suggested, but Christie turned it down. She had no desire to have children, confined by protocol to her actual. No paperwork was required for the connection, although, consequently, Batty thought that if they were in love with someone else but weren't married, wouldn't be considered. Christie disapproved with the betrayal. She once commented, "I loved him, but I couldn't withstand the sensation of being shared." Christie, over the span of 7 years, remained silent and forgiven numerous times, but ultimately became exhausted. Batty loved her and continued to refer to her as her wife. Among friends, and even declared his willingness to help. If they split up, she would treat him like a husband. Julie didn't require that. She was proud of their independence and decided to walk softly. The romance came to an end, stayed friends, and showed respect for each other. Everyone Batty created the script in 1981. For Reds, with a key position designed for Julie, declined. But it wasn't because she was unwilling to assist him, but since she thought the role ought to be performed by a woman from America who is not herself. The final choice was Diane Keaton, who was nominated for an Oscar. Reds Batty's conclusion featured an homage. For in 2000, when Warren Beatty was obtaining the Irving G. Thalberg Prize, Christie from the Academy made an appearance in The Knot as a titled guest in a tribute video. Buttus, a longtime friend, in attendance at just the appropriate time after separating from Batty. Warren and Jolie Christie didn't dive right into. She decided on another committed relationship, a more personal existence, withdrawing from the social circles. In Hollywood, Andrew moving herself from needless noise. The following men didn't replace anybody. They were just companions across various stages of every relationship in her life has its personal experience. But nothing turned her off. From the root, she had musicians, and musicians were selected first. He was contacted by producer Brian Eno Christie in. They lived for a short time in the late 1970s, together in the countryside of England. No one troubled them there, and no one had to see that the two shared innate compatibility in temperament and love for art, an aversion to noise, and a strong border with the media. As stated by, they might sit next to each other as friends, other in quiet and stillness for hours, feel very relaxed after it was over. No further explanation was required. American director Jim McBride arrived. When Christie was working on an indie movie that was eventually shelved, he had been direct, talkative, and fast-paced, the antithesis of the peaceful way of life she adopted. Their Christie, the relationship didn't last long, once only stated that he was too American, too loud, too hurried, no conflict, no regret with Terry O'Neill as the photographer. Relationship started as a result of O'Neill's taken a number of famous pictures of Christie, and a relationship developed during those sessions. Discreetly developed, but similar to many others. O'Neill later revealed that it didn't last. I had a deep affection for Jolie, but I didn't understand how to hear her quiet there. Nothing was wrong between them. They were just note enough to remain. Lou was another name. The famous Hollywood producer Adler Christie was at a party when they first met. Still debating whether to go back for a movie in the United States, Adler was affable, talkative, and incredibly familiar, specifically with the entertainment industry. She was attempting to distance herself from Christie after only a few months went back to England, putting a stop to before the relationship might develop complex. Reflecting on all of these gently, men arrived and left. None lingered for the long term, but each one was a Julie's willingness at the time to let her heart open, but she didn't look for attachment, and she didn't require labels after. She continued to adore Batty, but in her own way, gradually, on their own, and with clear purpose, and when she decided to be alone, it was merely because she discovered more solace in the silence following a string of unbound connections and silent farewells. Jolie Christie at last discovered a long-lasting companion across time. She first met him in 1979. Duncan Campbell is an investigator from Scotland, journalist at a London social gathering. Campbell is not an artist or a director, originated in the realm of truth. Exposés on hard-hitting reportage about injustice, corruption, and power are the same things. Christie has always been concerned about, seldom found in love. They grew up fast, intimate, and shared a home together without ever getting married or going public statements. For over 30 years, they stayed out of the spotlight and lived in peace in a residence in London's East End, and subsequently a tranquil Welsh farm. Campbell kept writing as Christie slowly moved away from the movie. They shared a life philosophy that says, there's no need for noise without requiring confirmation from the mob. A few newspapers in 2007 reported that Duncan and Jolie had covertly married in India. The shocking news public. Everyone had thought they were enduring partners without the paperwork. However, Christie just chuckled when questioned and stated, "Shit, I've been married for a long time. Don't trust the information you read in the documents." That response both rejected and validated the narrative precisely as Shielways managed her personal affair, ignoring reality while preventing others from determining the truth. In contrast to the men, Campbell had never attempted to step before him. He just stood in Julie's spotlight. They didn't create art next to her in silence. Together, yet they had a same idealistic outlook, environmental activism and concern for society opposition to nuclear power, and solidarity with Jolie, who has been forgotten, had no need to adore anybody else since, in her life, she had never before, didn't need to provide an explanation, must create room for someone else, and didn't need to protect herself, but never showed off those near. They observed the connection with Campbell as the only real safe for Jolie Christie harbor, not because they got married, but because they maintained their peace together. And, on an equal basis in a society where everything might make the news, they opted for the quiet alternative, and in Jolie Christie survived the silence, didn't accumulate hundreds of positions, appear frequently on television, and never ventured into manufacturing or directing, like to many of her counterparts, but with only a few of featured performances as well as a number of unusual decisions she left behind. Authenticity defines the cinematic legacy, depth, and ferocity in movies. She served as a representation of, not only for her, but also for the 1960s and 1970s, inherent beauty. Yet for a contemporary look of acting in a subtle yet effective way, Diana in Darling and Lara in Dr. Zhivago and her Don't Look characters. Currently, Mrs. Miller, Afterglow, and McCabe, each of the ladies depicted in Away from Her were intricate and conflicting, but consistently in control by keeping her away from her. Performance was so highly regarded that utilized as a textbook in medical colleges, an illustration of the behavior of Alzheimer's incredibly uncommon honor for a film position. But Christie's impact went beyond much more than the Storytime magazine used to claim that she had a greater influence on fashion than all 10 of the most stylish women combined. When she accepted her Oscar, she sewed her own wide leg jeans. She accomplished more than simply alter the perception of the Hollywood star put a stop to the concept that the stage should only be used for dresses. Afterwards, women's clothing was no longer something that needed authorization. In Jolie Christie's life was one of the first to go against what is typically expected, imposed on females in entertainment, refused to get married under social pressure, didn't bear kids. Unless she really desired not to reside in Hollywood for the benefit of her career and showed no fear, to raise awareness of the ethics of tax evasion in the sector or environmental issues, she became a silent symbol for a contemporary women's generation, those who had the courage to decide what they really desired. Even when it wasn't in style, without making frequent appearances in public, Christie's name is still displayed on the list of the best British actresses, prominent figures from the early 1960s, feminist role models, and possibly the most crucial title. For every lady who has lived life completely according to her own terms, from starting at 84, Jolie Christie's end has virtually vanished from the planet of entertainment without social media. Without interviews, no appearances on the red carpet, she resides in Amethyst Welsh home she shares with her spouse. Sheep-raising journalist Duncan Campbell walking and planting trees every day when, for the first time in 8 years, she was seen. Years at a laundry in July 2024, she wore a light blue top in East London, sunglasses, a scarlet scarf, and her inherent silver hair is a totally contradictory appearance. With the screen siren that used to flash, the Christie once had. It all in the 1960s, an Oscar-renowned beauty influence that spanned both the fashion and cinema industries. Nevertheless, she decided to take a step back, since her time was over, but because she decided to go an alternative route without noise that doesn't require recall, she didn't achieve success the Hollywood way, regarding the number of applauders, but on being able to maintain after everything in a world, oneself, where individuals are so often pulled off by celebrity naturally. Jolie Christie decided to vanish in order to lead a genuine life. And maybe that's the reason why even in her, despite her disappearance, her name still has a peaceful honor. Jolie Christie never made an effort to. She didn't run after the masses to gratify them. Awards weren't what eternal youth was all about, wasn't shaped by Hollywood standards, which she once demonstrated brilliantly then. Moved stealthily away from the spotlight to lead a solitary life, judged sufficient, although not everyone is able to, particularly. Someone who used to stand at the Jolie story takes place in the heart of an era, isn't a fallen stars, but rather a woman who made the correct decision for Evan when it wasn't trendy herself, and maybe that type of liberty is the most authentic version of excellence. What do you find most impressive about the life of Jolie Christie? A performance, a brave choice, or the manner in which she disappeared from the crowd but left a lasting impression? Leave a comment with your ideas. Remember to hit like below if you think it's important to share this tale, and sign up to continue exploring inspirational experiences like as Jolie Christie. We appreciate you being here.